I can never believe that Bach actually conceived that for this. I really can't. Now, the page we're on right now, when I was getting to know these pieces myself, this page made me think an awful lot. You know, he could have easily, after this huge creation, just chosen a new page. But he didn't. And, you know, we had those wonderful adagio and grave movements from the other sonatas, which were highly embellished, stopping on chords, then making beautiful connections between the chords. Well, now you look at this, and it bears no relation to those movements whatsoever. It's an entirely new creation. Why? Well, certainly, as more and more details seemed like they were part of something that was really a large creation, a creation of 6 pieces, I started to see more of maybe what's happening at this moment in the 6 pieces. And what I realized is, you know, the first ones that we had, the adagio and the grave, they're in 4/4. They're very large 4/4s, but they're in 4/4, slow 4/4. Well, isn't it amazing that we've had this enormous creation of the chaconne in a stately 3/4, on 3 beats per bar? And what do you know? We continue in a stately 3/4. And even more than that, I started to realize, you know, the chaconne has an interesting shape. There's about 2/3 of it which is in the minor key, you know, with the tremendous arpeggiando section. And then all of a sudden it changes to the major key, and about 2/3 of the rest of the piece is in a major key. And then the remaining, the smallest section, goes back into a minor key. Well, obviously, these 4 pieces in minor keys, when we've reached this moment that we're at right now, we've descended, in a sense, through all these 4 works. And now we begin to ascend, one step at a time. But in terms of symmetry, this is an amazing moment, because actually this is not a terribly long movement, this adagio. It's just the rest of this page, and then it goes on into a fugue, which is the other enormous movement in the whole cycle. This fugue's about 10 minutes long. What I realized is that actually all of this is symmetrical across this very important juncture, so that we have the huge fugue over here in the major key, this huge piece of music, and it balances with the huge piece of music which was the first minor part of the chaconne. Then there are 2 pieces in a major key that are within those 2 large things. And in between all of them is that last section of the chaconne back in the minor key. So we have the large section in minor, the medium section in major, the small section in minor, now the medium section in major, and the large creation in major again of this fugue. This fugue, by the way, if symmetry is not enough by other means, if you look at the theme of it, it's actually, in terms of its rhythmic size, it's the size of the 2 other fugue themes put next to each other. So we had, and then that size, those 2 little pieces of phrase in their rhythmic impulse. That's the first half, answered by. Well, it turns out that throughout the whole fugue, that division of the first half and the second half becomes a whole theme of the second large section of the fugue. I don't want to try to explain it, and I think it will be obvious to you. What will happen is you'll hear huge chords on what would be, and then an entirely new section start with and continue into other things. Another very, I find, delicious quality of this fugue is that it seems almost paradoxical. It looks like a hymn tune, and there's a lot to be said about that. But it also has the rhythm that's going to be very much like in the E major partita. So it's kind of simultaneously a chorale and a dance. Now, if symmetry didn't seem to be a theme, in the fugue itself, we have a fantastic, magnificent statement that's the first section. Then we have running notes that make the second section. Then the second section is where we take the first half of the theme and the second half of the theme, and we build fantasies on each of them separately. Then there's another running note sections. Now, if you didn't think that symmetry and turning things around was an idea, just wait till you get to this moment where he actually puts for us the word reverso. Al reverso. It's hard to see in there in the middle. And that's the theme upside down. Yes. That's the major section, and then running the fantasy section again. And then, as if symmetry had not been emphasized enough, we have the first section that happened in the fugue. It's repeated, almost verbatim, to finish the fugue. After that is a beautiful, poignant largo movement, and then a joyous presto. And I'm just going to say a few words about the E major partita and then play all of this in a continuous fashion. The E major partita, again, continues right where the C major left off, as if they're almost in the same breath. Here's the C major last movement, moving again in a excited 3/4, and of course the E major continues just almost in the same breath in an excited 3/4. That moves on to a very poignant, I always said lore, some people say lure. I'm not sure that someone will tell me the right way to say it, but anyway, it's a very delicate, introverted dance movement. Then the one that I played a little bit of, the Gavotten Rondo. Then a set of minuets, and do understand that the minuets go minuet 1, minuet 2, and then back to minuet 1. And then, really, as if we're vanishing in perspective, the movements become shorter and shorter and shorter. And the last two movements that will end the entire cycle are tiny. They're tiny. There's the bourrée, which is quite boisterous, and then after that, a very, very brief jig that ends the entire cycle. Well, here is going to be the Sonata number 3 and the Partita number 3, and it's a joy to present this music and certainly to present it. I want to say that the hero, which is next to me, is the Chrysler Guarneri del Gesù. Now, of course, I really have to remind myself that this piece was written in 1720, and this instrument was made somewhere between 1730 and 1736. I know there's a little confusion about that between that and the Goldberg. Chrysler didn't exist then. And really, I remind myself to forget that the sound of Fritz Chrysler does not have to come out of this instrument. Does not have to. It might, if I'm lucky. But I don't even want to say that. Really, it's important to remember that the music that actually captivated many of the energies of these violins in such an unforgettable way did not exist when the violins were created. The violins were created with a certain quality inside that turned out to match many ways of playing, the romantic ways of playing, the 20th century ways of playing. They turned out that way, but we didn't know that. At first, they just needed to be strong and clear and expressive and sweet and audible for the expression of the singing music to come across. Well, it's been a real pleasure to present this whole cycle, and now with the C major sonata and the E major partita, we'll finish this afternoon, and thank you.